Hey, folks. Welcome to the View podcast, episode 8, not 7, 8. I wrote 8 deliberately in front of me. I wrote 8 to not say 7, and I've said 7. Light on the ground tonight, but we're joined by Max from Leeds lately tonight to talk about the first portion of the season as well as the Angus Kinnear interview as well. Max, how are you doing, mate?
All right, thank you. Like I've been saying to you before, it's just quite quiet at the moment for Leeds news until the Square Ball came out with this interview with Angus Kinnear, as they do annually. So yeah, a bit to talk about now. So I'm excited to get into it.
Are you surprised that happened?
That he still did the interview? A little bit, but then it was penciled in, and I remember hearing them on the show a couple of weeks before, maybe a month or so ago, saying he's coming on, and then saying we've committed him to it by doing this, and then we've done it on purpose. We've mentioned that he's coming on so that he has to now, because otherwise people will be like, why didn't he come on? So I kind of then expected that it would happen still, but fair play to him for going on, because he knows what stick he's got from the fans over the years and what stick they've all got from the fans, and to still come on and talk about it when he knows he's going to face difficult questions, fair play to him.
Yeah, there's the usual polarizing opinion online about the interview. Some people are very negative about it and saying he shouldn't still be at the club, and then there's other people who are positive about it and are kind of seeing it for what it is. Usual bits of things being taken out of context and things being reworded and all the usual stuff that happens on Twitter. But I agree with you. I think the first thing I took out of it was fair play to him for actually doing it in the first place, because it was never going to be a comfortable conversation. It was never going to be a comfortable interview. You know, he's fully aware of what the Square Ball talk about and how podcasters talk. So he was lining himself up for some very, very tricky questions, and he handled them quite well, I thought. And he gave us some detail on some stuff. Some bits I agree with, some bits I don't agree with, but we'll get into some of that. We're not going to cover the whole thing. Just out of respect for the Square Ball, they have their own podcast. They have their own metrics and viewing numbers and all, and listening that they have to get to. So if you have time, it's an hour and a bit long. I would highly recommend grabbing a cup of coffee, sitting down and watching it, because it's very interesting. It's very well done. Dan Moylan and Michael Norman do a fantastic job of running the podcast and the questions, and in a very balanced and measured manner, which is not an easy thing to do. Again, we're talking about a topic that's very emotional as well, especially talking about the last 18 months of Leeds. So yeah, they did a great job. We'll get into that at the back end of this. I will say one thing about it. You were talking about the lads talking about it a couple of months ago. A few weeks ago, I think Dan mentioned Angus is on in a couple of weeks' time, and he looked at Mike and went, "You don't think he's going to come, do you?" And he's like, "Nope." He's like, "Nope." I fully expect him not to. But they did say we'll talk at the end of August. We'll do all of our talking at the end of August. So, and they did. They have done that, and fair play to them for doing that. So we'll cover a couple of bits of that. As I said, I'm not going to do the whole lot out of respect for the guys. Go watch the podcast, but we'll cover a couple of bits and get Max's opinion, and I'll give my little bit of opinion on it as well. We'll see where we go. But we do want to talk about the first half of the season, first third or fourth or quarter, whatever it is, the first bit of the season before the first international break. Bearing in mind we've got another one in a couple of weeks' time as well, which is going to break the season up as well. It would be great if Leeds could start leaking some stories during international windows. That would be fantastic for content, because there's
just for us.
Just for us to do something. I admire the silence. I also fear the silence from a content perspective. So yeah it'd be great. Right, so we're going to talk about the first part of the season, Max. We didn't speak to you on deadline day, so I do want to get your take on the transfer window as well. Was it aggressive? Was it positive? How do you feel about it?
I think the you've already said what the best thing anybody said about the transfer window was wait till the end of it, and you were saying that right from the start. To be fair, you were saying wait till the end of August, then we'll decide how things have gone. And I think people maybe misunderstood the meaning of aggressive. I don't want to tell people what they understood or what they didn't, but from my point of view, in my opinion, I think people maybe thought of aggressive as going out and buying players instantly, as fast as possible. And you can argue that that's probably what we did last summer when we recruited, when we brought in Tyler Adams, Brendan Aronson. Brendan Aronson was through the door like a day after the window. He was in very, very quickly. And we saw how that went. So maybe that's rushing. And maybe what we did this window was still be aggressive, because we went out and bought the best striker in the championship, a regular Bundesliga holding midfielder and international, somebody who played for Rangers in the Europa League and scored goals against Leipzig and Benfica, and has proved himself to be a very good ball-playing number 8. a right back who was player of the season in the Championship 21-22. And who else have we signed? Joe Rodon as well, who's obviously been on loan at some big clubs and actually played for Spurs a couple of times as well, and played internationally as well.
Yeah.
And I think the aggression that we actually showed in the end was being patient, making sure that we got people we wanted and for the right price as well. Aggressive negotiation, getting Carl Darlow for 400k, getting Joel Perreault, who is a striker who I feel could have easily gone to a Premier League club. Somebody like Everton would have been absolutely delighted to pick him up as a striker, I think. So all in all, I think it was a very, very good window. I did a video on my channel where I basically rated every single outgoing and incoming out of 10, then divided them by the amount I'd added together to get the mean, the average, and that came out as a 7 out of 10. And I think that's probably a fair estimation from my point of view, because not that it's the 49ers' fault, but all the outgoings, it was awful. It was terrible. We'll get into that bit, certainly with the Kinnear stuff a bit later on. But that wasn't their fault, but it still comes down as part of this transfer window. And so for me, that was the cloud, and the silver lining was the fact that we did some really, really good business for the 8 players, I think it was, that we did bring in. So I'm happy with that transfer window. The only thing we're missing is a number 10 and a left back. And if we can get them in January, then overall it's been like a perfect couple of transfer windows for a championship season.
Yeah, the reasons why we didn't do a left back or Charlie Taylor specifically was talked about during the week, and basically came down to a simple fact that Burnley didn't have cover to let him go. That was it, black and white. Leeds would have liked to have done it, Burnley would have liked to have done it, but there was no cover, so Vincent Kompany wouldn't allow him to leave. So you are potentially looking at a situation where, because Leeds haven't gone and done a left back, Junior Firpo could hit the ground running in the championship when he comes back after the international break and be a huge success. Or Leeds could be in a situation where we've left that gap there. We can go revisit it in January. If and when Burnley get cover in that position, then maybe we can step in. Could be a situation by then that if Charlie Taylor's not playing a lot of minutes, that he could actually say to the club, "Okay, I want to go and play. Loan me out or do something, but I want to go and play." So that could be a situation. 9 signings in total, but Angus Kinnear had a Freudian slip on the podcast today where he said we've brought in 10 players this window. There is a lot of talk that Leeds are looking at the free transfer market as well to bulk up the squad a little bit. And there's a couple of interesting ones that are there as well that we mentioned during the week. A name is escaping me right now, but I'll come back to it. Koulibaly from Frankfurt, who's a free agent right now. So he's been mentioned as a player that Leeds are keen on as well, but there's competition for that. So maybe there could still be some free agents come in. I wouldn't expect it, if I'm being honest, but there's a possibility. Well, but as you said,
Ipswich have just done it. Ipswich have done it today. They've brought in Axel Twanzebe on a free. I think there's certainly an argument for it. I mean, when you look at him, I think Lockie picked out Roberto Pereira, who used to play for Watford. I'm not sure whether we'd be able to get that done, but given the fact that he's not with a club at the moment, then potentially. And I think I don't know if you saw the quote from Troy Deeney that came out today. He plays for Forest Green Rovers now, doesn't he, in League Two?
Yeah.
He said that whilst he was a free agent, he went out to Dubai and he almost sort of lived out there for a little bit. And a lot of the footballers that he saw out there were saying that we've had some approaches, some clubs, but basically saying that they think they're too good for them. But Troy Deeney just loves football, so he was like, "I will go and play for you in any league." And he's not too proud and to take the wages. Yeah, the pay cut and all that sort of thing. So you could find that maybe you might get 1 or 2 where if you just dangle a carrot and say, look, regular football again, do you want it? Still getting paid, even if it is less, and we might go back up to the Premier League, then there's a potential of the free agent market. But
it's a good market at the moment. There's a lot of good names in that free agent. Usually it's young players or very much expired players kind of thing. But there's a lot of really good players that are on that list there right now. Twanzebe is a good signing for a championship club when he's not injured, and that's been his problem. But when he has been fit, when he was at Villa, I have a couple of friends here, Manchester United fans. They said they rated him very, very high. They thought he was going to be brilliant. He was captained by Van Gaal, I think, captained him at one point in the League Cup match and said that there was a leader in this player. And then he just got injured, and he was injured for an awful lot. But that was a player I remember looking early on the window thinking that'd be an easy one for Leeds to nick in and grab, whether it be a popular one or his injury record might be an issue, which is maybe why Ipswich is taking a chance on him. But there are some really good players you've already mentioned as well. Would be a fantastic signing as well. There's some really good players in there, so it's interesting to see the Leeds are considering that market. They might not move in it, but at least they're having a look at it. But they also think that when we come back, there's enough cover in that left back position with Byron will be back fit, Fair will be fit. You've got those two there. I was going to say you got Cody Drama as well, but you don't anymore. He's gone.
No.
So but I mean, look, the players that came in. Ampadu had a cracking game, 45 minutes, but he was excellent for Wales yesterday. He's looked like an absolute Rolls Royce since he's come in. Carl Darlow, we were all okay paying $6 million for him at one point, and then we got him for 600,000, 400,000, which is even better again. Good backup goalkeeper, could still be number one. Sam Byron brings a huge amount of experience to the squad and can do a job right and left back as cover, which is great. Joe Rodon and Jed Spence coming in as two loans from Spurs are two very shrewd signings, in my opinion. I think Joe Rodon's a cracking centre back, and I think Jed Spence is going to be probably one of our players of the year come the end of the season. I genuinely think he'll stand out that much. As you've already said, you get Joe Perreault, who's arguably the best striker in the championship right now because those who were up there with him have left now. So it's just him. Groove coming in as well, has a good record, but it takes him a bit longer to adapt to the championship maybe, but just still a good player there.
I think Gruev, the reason he's a really good signing is because he's cover for Ampadu. And Ampadu, I think, will start every week whilst he's fit. And I think he's brilliant. He's rapidly become my favourite Leeds player. I love a holding midfielder, the way he plays, breaking up play, breaking balls, everything that he does in there. We needed cover because if we didn't, once he's out the team, we've got nobody that can play that role. So even if Gruev isn't a starter, I think it's a really good signing to have backup for somebody who is a key player, which something that we actually haven't had before. We've struggled with that. When Tyler Adams was out, it was like, okay, who's going to play holding midfield? And we're back to centre backs again. Whereas now it's like, let's have a bit of depth for once. But sorry, I interrupted you. Go on.
No, you're fine. It's a great point. But it's just, I was going to say it's the same situation with Glenn Kamara as well. I watched them play last night in a bit of the game, and what I noticed about Glenn Kamara was the same thing I noticed about Ethan Ampadu when I watch him. The ability to find space in the middle of the park to always be an option to receive the ball, whether it's backwards or sideways, they're always there. They're always looking. They find these lovely little pockets. And just before the goal, Kamara does exactly that on the left-hand side in the middle. He managed to find a huge pocket of space, get the ball, plays into the 10, it's a 1-2 and a goal. So, like, having more players like that give us more options. And we needed that for a very long time in the middle of the park. And then the other one as well, and we should talk a little bit about this, is Jayden Anthony came in at deadline day at the last minute. He was announced after the extension. He was announced as well. Kind of came in under the radar at a very little fanfare, which I think is unfortunate for a player who has done very well in the championship when he's been here before, and had a significant part to play in Bournemouth's season last year in the Premier League. Also should be pointed out, when Angus Kinnear covered the Sinisterra, which we'll get to later on, but in that interview, he said that Jayden Anthony was a player that they had identified very early on in the transfer window as a winger they wanted if Harrison, Sinisterra, or Gnonto left. And they said that when they approached Bournemouth early in the window, Bournemouth said the player wasn't for sale, that he was part of their plans for the season. Leeds left it at that, moved on. He said they had long conversations with Joseph Paintsil. That was confirmed as something that Leeds did talk about. Had plenty of meetings with him, but it just didn't materialise in the end. And then when the Sinisterra move came in from Bournemouth, the deal was, you can have him, but we want Anthony in the deal. Leeds had turned down several bids for Luis Sinisterra that were below their market value. They said they got offers in 20 million for him, which was below what they paid and below what they wanted to, but this is what they wanted to sell him for. So if they could get somebody else in the deal, that was the caveat. We have to get somebody else in if we're going to let him go. And that worked out perfectly for Leeds. So they're very happy to have gotten Jayden Anthony, and we'll get to all the reasons why we should all be happy that Luis Sinisterra is no longer part of Leeds United, and we'll get to that in the second half. But when you look at all of that, yes, a ton of players have gone out. Kinnear very interestingly said that the players that have left were never part of the club's long-term plan, especially after looking at how they performed last season. He said the recruitment last year, we got it wrong. We know we got it wrong. We went with too many players from the same league, from a league that just they couldn't. They went for players that they thought were 6 and 7s out of 10 that could potentially be 8 out of 10. And he said we realized pretty quickly they weren't 6s and 7s out of 10. You know, that was the mistake that we made. You need to have 6s and 7s and a couple of 8s. And then when Sam Allardyce came in, the first thing Sam Allardyce said to them was, you don't have any world-class players in this team. And every team in this division has at least one. And you have none. And that's your problem. So they were kind of happy to see these guys go out. The plan is to sell them. From what I picked up from Angus, is to sell the bulk of the players that have left on loan will be sold. That's the plan. So they won't see them back. And then reinvest that, but they don't want to sell them unless they can get their book value for them, and that's important to them. So players have gone out. Leeds seem happy enough to have gotten rid of. They've saved 40 million in their wage bill, which has been reinvested, according to Kinnear, into transfers and new player wages, which has helped us have an advantage there as well. But I don't think you can look at the players that came in and think this is a weaker team than it was before these guys came in. And bearing in mind, we haven't seen enough of Groove, we haven't seen enough of Kamara, we haven't seen a whole lot of Spence, and then we've got Jaden Anthony, we haven't seen anything of yet either. All of them to be in the fold for the next Leeds game against Millwall, which is, I'm excited about that. I think it's an exciting proposition.
I think as well, when we were in perhaps even the Sheffield Wednesday game and the West Brom game, other games like that, at that point we were kind of looking at the bench going, Farke's not actually really got anybody on the bench that can come on and change the game. But with everybody fit and having given enough time to actually make a match day squad, you then look at the bench and you think, oh, okay, so if there's space in behind, you could bring Dan James on, or you could bring Jaden Anthony on, or Ampadu's just picked up a little knock, don't want to risk him, bring Gruev on. We're playing against a team with a low block. Maybe you play Kamara over Archie Gray because Kamara is more willing to get forward and integrate with the attacking players as well. So having that depth, like you say, them all being available for the Millwall game will help us out massively. And I think it'll allow Farke potentially to make subs earlier. I know he makes subs quite late anyway, but it could be like more of a reminder to him to say, hold on, I've got options here. Whereas we haven't really had that so far. And that's not really been anyone's fault. It's just the way things are in the transfer window. But yeah, I think it'll be nice to see a stacked bench.
Forget the players that are injured. There's so many that are injured as well that are coming back after international break as well. Like you've got Bamford should be back by the end of September. You've got Furbo, you've got Dan James, as you mentioned as well. We've got Paveda back on the bench now as well. Although didn't play because not enough training, but all of a sudden that bench starts to look more exciting, more impactful. And my issue with the substitutions so far is I just don't think Daniel Farke looks at his bench and trusts all the players that are on that bench currently. But I think once everyone's back with the new signings, that all of a sudden he's got a bench that A, he wants because he's bought those players, and B, are a better quality player that have played in the Premier League for Leeds as well. So all of a sudden that bench looks much more competitive than it has done.
Yeah.
Max, on the start of the season, though, he did say to us, Farke, this will take 10 or so games. You know, in terms of players, it was judged at the end of August, but he said it can take a couple of matches for his system to bed in. Are you happy enough with the progression you've seen so far in the team from the first game of the season till the last one we played?
Well, I think you already hit the nail on the head. It's exactly what Farke said. It's going to take a while, and what I mentioned a minute ago. Whilst you're in sort of the throes of the transfer window, you're not going to really have a chance to get a settled first 11. Really, the teams that are doing well, maybe did their business a little bit earlier in the transfer window and had a more of a set team that then when they're buying players, they can integrate one or two of them or whatever. Us, we've signed a striker because we literally didn't have one to play. So then we've got to throw it. We had to throw him straight in. He did well against Ipswich, but we had to throw Perot straight in. Same with Byram and some of the other players as well. He had more of a pre-season, but I think it was always going to be a bit of a learning process. And I can't remember what show it was on, but I mentioned it the other week how Leeds have almost been wired up to not be able to play passes to each other because of the pass management in Jesse Marsh, and then obviously a short stint with Gracia and Sam Allardyce, not enough to change anything. I think, ironically, if Farke had come in straight after Bielsa, there would have been a smoother transition in terms of everybody is able to pass the ball, everybody is able to progress the ball quickly, and the counter-attacks, like you've mentioned, I know you've mentioned that before, haven't you, how we're too slow on the counter-attacks, we're too slow passing the ball and getting the ball forward, and it kills us because we can't actually utilize any of the space that we've made by counter-attacking teams who usually don't give away much space. Having said all that, Farke is trying to integrate his style of play, trying to get the players used to playing football again, getting into a mode where, and I know I've mentioned this before with Bielsa and the difference between Bielsa and Marsh is with a manager like Farke, he will get a player to understand each situation of the game. If the right back's got the ball in a certain area of the pitch, say he's on the halfway line, everybody knows where they're meant to be because of positionally on the pitch, because of where the ball carrier is, or when a certain type of ball gets passed, you might get a certain player that goes, right, okay, that's gone out to the right wing, I'm going to tuck in now, for example. It's not exactly that, but just for example. And I think that really takes a little bit of time to bed in anyway. And the fact that we've come from Jesse Marsh ball to Farker ball is going to make it even more of a difficult transition. You add into that all the new players coming in. It's a very difficult transition to make. And obviously Farker as well had a little bit of turmoil waiting to come in anyway because of the 49ers takeover and the EFL approval and all that stuff. So I think it's expected, really, is what I'm coming around to. It's expected how we've performed, and I don't think it's anything to particularly panic about. And what I actually like this season is that I don't see too many people actually panicking. And I know it sounds ridiculous because we've played 5 games or whatever it is. People shouldn't be panicking, but usually with Leeds there is people saying, "Oh no, this is terrible. This is the worst thing in the world." But for me, I actually do think that I've seen a lot less of that, and it does seem like people are like, "This is a long season. Let's wait until after this international break. Try and get a run up towards Christmas." And like we mentioned the other week I think it was on Joe's show, where we said this league is like if at Christmas you're 7th or 8th, you could be in an automatic spot by the end of the season. It's how it works. People start with an outside chance and then they make runs and go. So there's nothing that we can really glean from what's happened so far. We just need to get all our players bedded in, get them to learn the system, and get them to start beating teams that we should be beating, like Sheffield Wednesday. But obviously we haven't had the time to figure out how we're going to beat those low blocks properly yet, I don't think. But I'm fine with how the season started.
Yeah, and the things that I kind of pointed out before that I thought were the issues of the current system, which was the slow build-up play and just the speed between transitions from defense to attack and attack to defense. There's little bits I've seen against Wednesday. I thought our transitions back into defense were far better than they had been all season. We got bodies behind the ball much quicker, which made us less exposed, less likely to concede goals, which was great. But if you're gonna beat a low block, you've got to break quickly when you get the opportunities to break, and you've got to break fast. And for me, at times, Chris Somerville takes too much out of the ball, takes too many touches, slows the game down. Willie Gnonto can be like that a little bit. I can understand the reasons why, but it's nothing negative because it's a case of get the system down first, get the patterns of play down, just understand that they have to be done. And then over time, you increase the tempo, you increase the pace of those movements, and the passes get firmer and faster, and the moves get quicker. And then you're in a situation where you can break them down. But that takes time. It does take 8, 10, and 12 games.
I think there's also almost a hesitancy through maybe a bit of PTSD of current players like Luke Ayling, to fully commit to those movements. So, for example, we counterattack. Ampadu wins the ball back. He passes it out wide to whoever it is, Gnonto on the right-hand side. Really, Farke would want the fullback fully committing, going for it, making a run so that the player can play him over the top. I think Jed Spence probably does that, which I think will help us massively. But I think what's happening is Luke Ayling's like, I know I can't get back, or this has happened so many times before, and maybe he doesn't fully commit to the run. Not just Luke Ayling, anybody else in that team, that players are a little bit hesitant to think, if we fully commit to this and we get counterattacked, we could be screwed here. And hopefully it's like you say, it takes time to get out of the mentality of slowing things down and fully committing to things. But some of these players played under Bielsa where you were very much, you commit to this 100%, otherwise it's not going to work. So hopefully they sort of learn to go, do you know what? If this is wrong, it's on the manager. Like if something bad happens from this, it's on the manager, because he's told me that I need to, or I assume he has told them to fully commit to those counterattacks, because that's when you're going to get the space, like you say. So hopefully bringing Jed Spence in, bringing a few other players into the starting 11 who don't really have any inhibitions or any fear about going forward will speed up those counterattacks, as well as the actual time it takes for the system to bed in.
I don't think anybody at this point of the season would have thought the top 2 teams in the championship would be Preston North End and Ipswich, which is why I think we can relax a little bit. Even though there's a 7-point gap between us and Preston, I don't see Preston being there at the end of the season. I don't. No. So I think that the gaps will close. everyone was very worried about Southampton and Leicester's business. They didn't in the window because, as you said, they did it early, but they lost a lot of big players very late in the window as well. I think Kinnear said today as well, if you look at how many players we lost, as well as Leicester and Southampton, we pretty much all lost about the same amount of players and brought in roughly the same amount. It's going to take a while to bed in. The system change, as you said, all the new players, new system. But Leeds are currently occupying what has been our historical comfort zone in the Championship of 15th, which I think we should just be named Leeds at this point. You've got 13th, 14th Leeds, 16th, 17th, 18th. Yeah. That's what it should just be from now on. We should sponsor 15th position. But it's slap bang in the middle of the table after 5 games. We've got a win under our belt. We've got a defeat. So we've had 1 defeat and 3 draws. One of the biggest things when I was coaching and when I was playing, one of the biggest things we used to say with new managers when I went into a new team was, it is vitally important until this system is nailed down that we don't lose games. Not necessarily go win games, but it's important that in the initial weeks of this season, we don't lose matches, because then all of a sudden draws can be really helpful. Those points add up, especially when you start adding 3 points here and there to that as well. All of a sudden, that becomes a much healthier picture. So we're still on 6 points from 5 games. We've got a 0 goal difference, which is, I think, good for how we normally conduct ourselves in the Championship. Having 0 is not bad. 7 goals scored, 7 goals against. Plenty of different scorers in that mix as well. I think it's 7 different league scorers as well, which is
as well. 7 goals conceded, but 3 of them came in 1 game, didn't they? So when you actually look at the other games, we've not been conceding an average of 2 a game in those other games, have we? So that is an improvement. I think as well, just something I've quickly thought of. Carl Darlow, a lot of people have been clowning him or saying that he's crap because of the performance against Salford. But I think, and I said this on my channel, I think, but a goalkeeper isn't measured by how good he is at penalties, because how often does a goalkeeper have to face penalties?
You're not supposed to save them.
Yeah, not very. A striker should be scoring them. And yes, that one went through his arms, but it's unfortunate. It's unlucky. We haven't actually seen him make a single mistake, I don't think, actually in open play. I was trying to think of the words there, in open play. So still 400k, it's ridiculous. But yeah, sorry, that just came into my head. Just has to.
The definition of a free hit is that, like, it's 400k for a keeper who's got Championship winning experience. And I said on Joe's show last week, goalkeepers need a run of games before you start to see their capability, and it's important. I think Melly came into the Leeds team for us as well. There was similar question marks around what he was going to do, and over time you start to change your opinion because they need consistency. Carl Darlow isn't playing under 21 football every single week, so he's not playing matches outside of training games. And the difference in a training game and a competitive game is massive. It's a huge difference. The speed of it, the atmosphere, everything. He does have a very vocal stand behind him, at least one half a game telling him how crap he is. And then he has our fans the second half, who at the moment aren't telling him great things either. So you've got all that to deal with. So you can understand it takes a couple of games. I genuinely believe in what I've heard is that it was expected that Meslier would leave the club, and they didn't think that they would have Meslier here, and Carl Darlow would be a first choice. But now, as things have happened, they didn't get the bids. They got bids in the early teens for Meslier. Sorry, for Stroke, they got bids in the early teens they got offers of 20 million for Meslier, but not what they believed that he's valued at. So they said no.
Right.
So yeah,
good to see that they will say no if it doesn't meet their expectations.
That's the thing for me. A lot of people saying, Jesus, I'd bit your hand off for 22 million for Meslier. I was like, well, he's a 24-year-old goalkeeper. He's miles away from his peak. He's only going to be worth more money. Good season this year with Leeds. If we do get promoted, obviously,
goalkeepers hit their peak in their early 30s.
30s, yeah.
He's got like 10 years until he hits his peak.
Miles off. And he's still in his learning phase of football. So huge amount of time there. So what I am glad is that Leeds are saying no, because I don't believe any version of history would have been different. If Leeds previous owners had been in charge this time around, I can fully see us snapping off somebody's hand for 20 million for Meslier, snapping off somebody's hand for 20 million for Sinisterra, 12 million for Stroke. I could see all those bids being accepted pretty easily as well. So we're in a better position. The issue for me with the system so far has been last year, I made a statement with several different managers that Leeds can do one of 2 things. They can attack or they can defend, but they can't do both. They can't attack and defend, because when we did go for it and we attacked, we conceded loads of goals. And if we sat back and defended like we did against Newcastle away last year, we'll get a 0-0 draw, but we'll create nothing during the game. So it's what do we want from this? And what I've seen so far is the same thing so far this season. If you look at the Ipswich game, we went for it in the first half. Went for it. scored 3 goals, left so much space in the back, and got caught as well and conceded 2 in the first half. In that game in total, every time we went and committed, we conceded on the break. Then if you look at the game against Sheffield Wednesday, we sat a lot deeper. And even the second half against this, which we sat a lot deeper. But we sat deeper against Sheffield Wednesday and we didn't concede. But we didn't get in behind Wednesday enough to actually score any goals as well. So for me, Farke's big issue is going to be, how do we fix that? How do we get us to defend effectively but also attack in a manner that we can score goals as well? So that's the bit for me that I'm looking forward to seeing be fixed. And I've got confidence that he will fix that. I've no doubt in the manager.
Yeah, I think he's a very competent manager, isn't he? And he's shown that he can do it in this division before, and not only in terms of footballing, but just the way he conducts himself. I'm very happy with him. I'm like, he's not doing anything that's annoying or like. I didn't hate Jesse Marsh. I didn't really have anything against him. I just don't think it worked, and he wasn't good enough in the end. But he was too, and he learned this, but he was too willing to go on every talk show and talk about everything. Well, Daniel Farke says what he needs to do in his press conference, and that's it. It's a very sort of German efficient attitude towards it. Yeah, just I'll say exactly what I need to say. No more, no less. Done. Thank you very much. I'm going back to coaching my team. I like it. Yeah,
I there was bits of Jesse Marsh that I did like. I did like the fact, and this was purely from being a coach. I liked hearing him talking about everything they were doing. I liked him peeling back the curtain and getting to see behind the scenes, because then look, when Javi Garcia came in, he just told us nothing at all.
Yeah.
Nothing. You're like, I'd like to know some stuff that's going on. I'd like to know what they're doing behind the scenes. That's why I love Bielsa as well. When he starts press conference and start talking, you got so much information from him. So if you're a coach and you're learning the game as a coach as well, these are just some absolutely fantastic nuggets in there. Fortunately for Jesse, it just didn't ever really work on a pitch for the guys. That was the biggest problem for him.
I think what maybe should have been a red flag is Jesse Marsh is the only manager I've seen who his entire tactical philosophy can be found on YouTube from his own mouth. Yeah. Telling people how he plays and giving coaching seminars and stuff. And through watching them all, I was able to pretty much get into a 15, 17-minute video his entire tactical philosophy and the way he plays, or at least as much as I could possibly think that he had. There might have been more, but for me, it was probably a red flag that I could get it all into a 15-minute video because it was all out there. You don't see that of any other coach, do you? You don't see any. You might see somebody who's a lot more intelligent than I am manages to, or in terms of football, it manages to work it out from just watching them, which I think is a remarkable thing to have, to be able to work out a whole system just from watching them. And then I sort of take stuff from what they've done and use their data and insights to try and form my own opinions about things. But it should have been probably a bit of a red flag that Marsh was like that. But Farke, it wasn't the same thing.
Not at all. Not at all. He gives you enough, but not everything. He doesn't tell you how you can beat him, which is more important.
Yeah.
Screaming at the television at press conference, stop talking, Jesse, stop talking. We'll get into the Kinnear stuff now. We won't take much longer. We'll get into this a little bit. The bits that I want to focus on are as I said, I'm not going to do the whole thing. So I just want to focus on the Sinisterra and Adams thing. We talked about in the news today as well. I want to get your opinion on it. So Angus was on the Square Ball podcast. He was asked about the Adams and Sinisterra situation. Dan Moylan did a really good job of pressing him on why they left. First time around, Angus kind of politically maneuvered the question a little bit by talking about the players they brought in. Second time around, he gave a little bit of information around. Third time around, Dan asked him, did they need to go? Did they need to leave? What happened? Can you tell us more? So basically what he has said is, without going into too much detail, he has basically said that the lengths that the players were willing to go to leave Leeds was a massive shock to them. He said that they vehemently wanted out and they were willing to crawl through glass to get out of Leeds. And that shocked him and surprised him. He said there's only so much you can do to keep a player, and then there's a decision you just have to make to let them go. He said we didn't get an offer for Sinisterra that we valued him at, probably because of his injury history or the games he played last season. But he said, but we believe he's worth more than we paid for him, and we believe he's worth a higher book value into next season, the year after. And we think we'll get that from him when we sell him. It was very clear that I think Sinisterra will not come back to Leeds United. Even if Leeds get to the Premier League, I think he's done. Himself and Adams appear to have threatened legal action against the club to get out of their contracts, which is not cool, because if their contract's expired, if the clause is expired, then they expired. But the both players seem to be willing to go to stronger lengths to take Leeds to court. Adams threatening to sue Leeds, and Sinisterra, as I said, would go to any length to get away from the club. That was his take on it. So, I feel sorry for the kids that got the photograph taken on outside Tor Barch when he said he was staying there, because now it looks like he was just taking the mick out of them, which
have you seen?
Nice.
Do you remember when Loic Remy played for QPR?
Yeah.
And he did the exact same thing, but he was actually on the pitch in a QPR shirt, going up to all the little kids saying, "No, I'm staying," and he was gone like a week later. It's like, just don't say anything.
Don't say it. You're a hero to some of these kids. Like, take that on your shoulders and bear it in mind. You see the things that Georgina Rutter and some of the players did this week when they dealt with the kids and some stuff, which is fantastic to see. I love that kind of stuff. So fair play to them. The interesting bit, Max, before I get your take on the Sinisterra thing all up, the interesting part for me was when Dan asked him, would you rather they stayed? And Kinnear didn't just answer. He thought about it. His facial expressions changed. He looked genuinely annoyed. And I don't think he was annoyed at the question. I think he was annoyed having to talk about the situation, or it brought him back to when the situation happened.
Yeah.
And he just said, no. Straight up, one word, no. And I thought that said a lot. And then he said the players won't be on the Christmas card list this year, which is a joke, tongue in cheek, but I think it says an awful lot about the situation that the club were in. He also said Willie Gnonto's situation was blown out of proportion, was slightly different. He said that, yes, we know that the player refused to play for Leeds. He said, but he was very badly advised by an agent who had far more influence over him than he should have. And he said it was resolved much quicker. Player came, he's committed, it's done, we move on, everything's fine with him. Great. But for Sinisterra and Adams, who's an international captain, to behave the way that he's played is unprofessional. Sinisterra to act the way that he's acted towards the end of the transfer window was unprofessional at minimum. They both gone to Bournemouth. I'm sure Bournemouth fans would be great. They've got two croc players from Leeds to start with. But when they are fit, even if their moves are made permanent, don't be shocked, Bournemouth fans, if you go down this year or next year, that these two players don't do the exact same thing again, because
Bournemouth might be down by the time they're fit.
That's another point as well. Yeah. And what's your take on that situation, Max?
I like the fact that we seem to be now taking no crap. Like, just being like, okay, Willie Gnonto, you've not got a clause, you're staying here, mate. And like you say, blown out of proportion a little bit, badly advised. But I think the fact that they had the patience to say, look, you've been and told him you've been badly advised here, and he's accepted that and apologized and whatever. That's its situation on its own. And Gnonto's now with us, and he's going to give everything. I feel he's not going to not try.
So far, looks great.
Yeah, the other two, I think that is the opinion that the fans would have as well. Like, if you don't want to be, it literally comes back to Liam Cooper's quote, doesn't it? If you don't want to be here, then paraphrase, but there's the door.
Yep.
So just go. Yeah. If you don't want to play for Leeds, then you don't want to play for Leeds, go, and we'll get you wages off the books and we'll bring somebody else in. I think the Adams one, I think, is a good deal for us because we got slightly more than we bought him for. Yeah. And we're able to reinvest that because of profit and sustainability, all that sort of thing. It gets that amount of money back. It minuses that from our spend, or however it works. But basically, it gives us the ability to buy players. The Sinisterra one, I think, is really good from Leeds because, yes, it was very late, and obviously they can't do anything about that. They've got to deal with the situation as it comes at them. And like you said, I don't know if you've actually said it on here or when we were chatting beforehand, but they identified Jayden Anthony as somebody who they would really like early in the window. But we're told no by Bournemouth because he was a part of their immediate plans, and Iraola himself said that he'd played the first 3 or 4 games, really liked him. But because Sinisterra, Bournemouth were so desperate to get Sinisterra across the line, we even had to use a deal sheet. Leeds were like, okay, give us Jayden Anthony then. We really wanted him. Give us him then, because that was who they wanted. It wasn't just a random player. It's somebody who they'd already identified would be a really good player for Leeds in the Championship. And they said, all right, then, it doesn't happen unless we get a replacement. So give us him. And they've obviously been like, oh, we don't really want to lose him as well. we didn't really want to do that. But they've been forced into it by Leeds being aggressive, and I think that is being aggressive. And I think it came down to the 11th hour, right at the end of the transfer window. Yeah, it's still being aggressive because you're saying, look, if you're taking him off us, we have to have a replacement, and you've got somebody who we already identified as a target. So cough up, or it doesn't happen. And I think that, in contrast to what happened with Dan James last season, I've said it a couple of times now over different shows and stuff, but I do think it's important to mention because it shows a stark contrast. Dan James down at Fulham having his medical because Leeds. I can't remember who the player was that we were trying to sign that fell through. Was it when we were trying to sign a striker? It might have been,
I don't actually think at that time it was anybody coming in. I think it was just Dan James wanted game time for the European Championships and Jesse Marston. I know in January the Jack Harrison deal was to get Zaniolo. They wanted him to go down there to contribute the wages to bring in Zaniolo, and then that fell through. They cancelled the Jack Harrison one. But I think Dan James was literally a case of, well, you're not going to play many games, so you can go on loan if you want for the World Cup.
But I think they then didn't they then decide that they didn't have enough depth, but still let him go anyway.
Yeah.
So I think that shows a contrast of saying, like, it's the same as what Fulham did with Polinia. They've got a player there who's going to go to Bayern Munich for a lot of money, and they're saying, do you know what? Come home. Sorry, we haven't got a replacement for you. We couldn't find it in time. And that's what Leeds would have done, I think, if we didn't have a replacement, and then they would have had to say, yeah, let's go to court. Because, I mean, you've got to have a replacement in. You've got to have somebody. If you're going to lose somebody that important at that stage of the window, you've got to have a replacement. And I made a video saying that I think there'd been links throughout that day to Elias Chair and some other players as well who I thought would be really good, but they couldn't. It was just too late. And QPR said we wouldn't have been able to get a replacement in anyway. Yeah. So I've gotten off on a bit of a tangent, but I think Sinisterra, if he doesn't want to be here, then go. Get out. And if we can bring somebody in I think he scored 8 and assisted 6 in the championship a couple of seasons ago, last time he was in the championship. So it's somebody who stays fit, who scores goals, who assists goals, decent player. I'm happy with it. In the end,
he did manage an assist in the Premier League last year, which Sinisterra didn't. So does that. I think he's a good player. I think it's a good signing. I think it's good to get a player and he wants to be here. There was a lot of rumors on deadline day, as there always is, stuff that's flying around last minute. The player was trying to get out of the deal and didn't want to come, and that's what caused the delay. It now appears that from listening to the interview and hearing Daniel Farke talk about him, he wanted to come to Leeds. The delay seems to have been in the actual structure of the deal. And as far as Leeds saying we want Anthony, and them saying, well, no, you're not getting him, and Leeds saying, well, you're not getting Sinisterra, then end the story. So figure that one out and come back to us. So then they eventually did buckle. That was the delay. So Kinnear also did mention that they did look at going after Cameron Archer. They did look at going after Guy Koresh, and they did look also at going after Hammer. They inquired about all of them and basically said that they were players that were heading to the Premier League, and there just was no way of competing financially, or talking about 20 million pounds for some players. Guy Koresh went for 20 million, Archer went for 19, and Hammer went for 15 or 17 million or something like that. So they all went to the Premier League, and he said it just wasn't going to happen. So it was important that we went after someone else that we knew we could get, and that's where Joe Pirro came in. They got him done. So they did identify the right targets. They did go after the right people. That's aggressive in terms of how I am. And then if we look at the players that are there, I think most of the players that came in will start games outside of maybe Darlow and Byron from time to time. The rest of them, I think, will start and play most every game this season. So that's a strong transfer window in that case. Yeah,
definitely. But
right.
I think as well, just on Jaden Anthony, I did a video on him and I found that he was in the 97th percentile for clearances from his own box as a midfielder. Like, as in, if anybody doesn't know what percentiles are, he's in the top 3% basically in men's top 5 leagues over the last 365 days as a midfielder for clearances is in his own box, and he's a winger, so shows that he's willing to get back and do his defensive duties as well. And I think Daniel Farke will be very happy to see things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Max, we'll leave it there. Massive thank you, as always, for joining me. Folks, go check out Max on Leeds Lady. Give him a subscribe if you want tactical breakdowns, analysis of games, match views, and watch alongs as well. Max covers all that over on Leeds lately as well. So go check that out. Show a bit of love to Max as well. And a massive thanks to everyone who's watched the shows this week and the podcast. I know it's light on the ground this week. I know. Trust me, I know. I'm looking at the analytics on my channel. I'm like, yep, there's nothing happening. So I did say to everyone as well, I'm away next week. I am traveling with work, so I'm in New York for the whole week. I'm not back till Tuesday next week, so I will do my best to get some content out during the week. If you haven't watched the news video, over the course of the week, and some other stuff around the interviews and that coming in the next couple of weeks as well. Then hoping to get finalized and boxed off. And you can check all that out if you want to. And if you like the channel and you want to help support me as well, you can do so by subscribing to the channel and liking the video. And I appreciate that. So that being said, massive thanks, Max. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Talk to you soon. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.